Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. This is a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease, and you create the webinar with your questions. So every week is a little bit different, and I have no idea where we'll go tonight. We'll find out based on what your questions and where you take us. So the way that you participate is you can either listen or you can write questions. And the questions, you can do that by writing over here on the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. There's a chat box. Write your question to me through there. The only thing I request is that when you write your question, that you only hit the enter key at the end of the question after you've completed the whole thing. Keep in mind that each time you hit the enter key, it actually sends a separate question to me, which gets to be just a little complicated to manage from my end when I'm trying to follow what's happening with these questions. So tonight is the first webinar in the next 3 weeks. So we'll do one each of the next 3 Wednesdays, counting tonight as the first one. So I look forward to spending this time with you. So if we don't get into everything tonight, obviously there's the next webinars that we can do that too. During the webinar tonight, I am creating a recording. So if you happen to miss parts of the webinar, just realize it is being recorded, and that tomorrow morning, somewhere around 6:30 or 7 in the morning, I will be sending out an email to everyone that participates tonight and that signed up for it, actually, indicating that the recording is done. If I get it edited tonight, and I should be able to, and then I'll give you links to where to listen to that recording. Now, if for some reason you don't get the email, it's easy to find copies of the recording. First thing you can do is look at TreatLine.net on the homepage. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is a video feed for the webinar tonight. The other place to look for it is at TreatLine.net, TreatLine by Marty Ross MD. If you look on the webinars page and you scroll down towards the bottom of that, you'll also find a copy of the recording. You can find that recording also at my supplement store, Marty Ross MD Supplements, on the homepage. Scroll down towards the bottom of that homepage. And then I will post it on Facebook tomorrow morning. And that's at facebook.com/TreatLine. And then finally, you can find it on my YouTube channel too. Okay, so there's plenty of ways to be able to find copies of the recording tomorrow after I get it all processed and ready to send out to you tonight. Okay, all right. During the webinar tonight, I will be posting your questions on the screen. So if you actually are participating in the live version of this tonight, you'll get to see those questions. But I still read the questions because in the recorded version, the questions don't show up, all right? Now, for the most part, I'll probably be able to answer most of your questions tonight. You all stump me every now and then, which is good. It's good to get stumped because sometimes the questions you raise cause me to go back and come up with some new thoughts and new ideas and new things I even try out. So feel free to ask questions, and I hope I can answer most of them. But if not, it could be a learning experience for me along the way too. All right. So I think without any other, I don't think there's anything else I need to give you in way of background here, but let me go ahead and get the first question posted up here. All right. So this first question is from Gail. Hi, Gail. Let's see here. I have interstitial try that again. I have interstitial cystitis and many things hurt my bladder. I can't take turmeric. What other anti-inflammatories do you recommend? Most herbs and supplements irritate my bladder. All right. So Gail, I think you have some, there's a second part to this too, but let me just answer this first part and then I'll pull up your second part, okay? So one of the things that you could do that's actually quite helpful for treating interstitial cystitis and it helps lower cytokines is to take the herb called quercetin, all right? So the reason that I use turmeric or the derivative, a component of turmeric called curcumin in my Lyme disease treatments, as many of you know, is I use it as a means of lowering inflammation that occurs in Lyme. And specifically, whenever you have Lyme, the immune system tries to get rid of the germ, and white blood cells that are trying to attack the germ make a group of chemicals called cytokines. They're good and they're bad, okay? On the good side, they actually turn the immune system on. But on the downside is if they get made in excess, and they are often made in excess in Lyme disease, they give you what we call Lyme symptoms, okay? So too many cytokines disturb your sleep. They make you hurt. They give you brain fog, make it so you can't think, give you low energy, can disturb how your hormone systems work, basically give you nerve problems. Basically, most of the symptoms that we see in Lyme disease are really due to too many cytokines, okay? So curcumin, which is a component of turmeric, is one of my favorite things to lower that inflammation. And usually I like using a liposomal form of curcumin. Liposomal tends to increases absorption. Liposomal means it's microscopically wrapped in fat, which increases the absorption of the curcumin, because curcumin and turmeric on their own are not that well absorbed, actually. But if you can microscopically wrap them or prepare them a certain way, you get better absorption. Okay, so I like using a liposomal variety of curcumin, 500 to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay, now the other thing you can do that will lower cytokines, though, is to be on the herb called quercetin. And quercetin also will lower the inflammation that is seen in the bladder lining that occurs when you have interstitial cystitis. Interstitial cystitis, everyone, is a condition where you have inflammation of the lining of the bladder. It gives you symptoms just like a bladder infection. So you can feel like you got to pee a lot, you can have burning on urination, you have the urge to pee frequently. And a lot of that is due to the inflammation of the bladder lining. And quercetin decreases that inflammation, but quercetin also gets inside of white blood cells and turns down their production of cytokines, just like the curcumin does, okay? So quercetin, you want to dose as 250 milligram pills, usually how it comes, and you want to take 500 milligrams, which is 2 pills, 3 times a day. All right. Now, the other thing that's useful for interstitial cystitis is to take some glucosamine sulfate along with your quercetin. All right. So what happens with glucosamine sulfate, which many of you think of glucosamine sulfate as being the thing we give to rebuild your cartilage in your knees because it helps rebuild cartilage, it also, in the bladder, is turned into a microscopic gelatinous coat that lines the covering of the bladder so that when your bladder lining is inflamed, the acidic nature of your urine will not keep irritating it. Okay, so it acts as a barrier. And so that's glucosamine sulfate, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. So there's 2 herbs I like to use for interstitial cystitis together. It's quercetin and the glucosamine sulfate, like I just said. And it just so happens you can actually find both of those together in a compound called by Tanica, which is called bladder ease. Sometimes it's also called IC blend, interstitial cystitis blend, but I think they're currently calling it bladder ease. And if you were to do that, you want to do 4 pills 3 times a day of that. So that's a combination of your glucosamine and your quercetin together. Okay. All right. So that's kind of my approach to interstitial cystitis, basically. And again, the quercetin is really good for lowering your cytokines. Most people can tolerate quercetin. Quercetin, many of you may be familiar with too. It's something we use to stabilize mast cells. Mast cells are the cells where allergy chemicals are made, like histamines. They also can get made inside mast cells from infections turning on the mast cells too. And if they really get turned on, that's something called mast cell activation syndrome, okay? Which I've got a whole article about that at TreatLine as well too, but I'm not going to go there right now with you. All right, so Gail, let me see if I can find the second part to your question here. Okay, so the second part of Gail's question, let's see. I have horrific pain in my feet and aching in my legs. It feels like the bottom of my feet are bruised. Can Lyme do that, or is it specific to Bartonella? What is happening physiologically to cause this pain? What is the bacteria doing that causes this awful pain? So Bartonella, so the co-infection Bartonella, everyone, is a bacteria that sometimes gets transmitted along with tick bites, okay? And it is known for giving infection, especially of cells that line your blood vessel walls, all right? And the symptoms that can be seen with it sometimes are pain on the bottom of the feet. Sometimes it gives a lot of neurologic symptoms like numbness, burning kind of pains. It can give a lot of psychiatric problems like anxiety, bad depression, hallucinations sometimes. It can give interstitial cystitis, actually. So, Gail, just keep that in mind. Bartonella sometimes can be one of the leading causes of interstitial cystitis and Lyme disease. It can give restless legs. Those are some of the symptoms we'll see. Sometimes people with Bartonella will get a rash that looks like scratch marks or stretch marks as well, too. Okay, and Bartonella sometimes can give seizure-like episodes or feelings of jitteriness or shakiness that occur too. So, Gail, I'm already wondering, based on your first question of interstitial cystitis plus this foot pain, as to whether you might have Bartonella as part of this. Now, I'm not clear what the mechanism is that gives people with Bartonella pain on the bottom of their feet. I have not run across why that occurs, so I'm not going to be able to address the why part of that for you, but I would look for the possibility of Bartonella. Okay, that's what I would do. All right, so let's see. How do you diagnose Bartonella, everyone? Well, the way you do that is based on your symptoms. The problem is that we estimate there's 30 strains of Bartonella, and we can only do decent testing for 2. So you got to look at what your symptom complex tells you. Okay, so I'm going to just do a quick screen share here, just show you all a couple things here. All right, so this is TreatLine. And as many of you know, I've redesigned it here, so this is the new designed version. So a couple things. Number one, if you're looking to see, do I have an infection? What infections do I have as part of my Lyme disease? I've got a whole chapter here about how do you diagnose. So that's this one right here, how to diagnose. And in terms of the Bartonella babesia, to look and see if you have those, I usually go by symptoms because testing is poor. And that's this one article called It Could Be Bartonella Babesia, The Symptoms and Signs. Read that. It gives you enough information to figure out whether you have Bartonella babesia based on your symptoms, okay? All right, and then in terms of interstitial cystitis, take a look at my chapter on bladder and take a look at this article called Plumbing Repair Natural Medicines for the Bladder. In here, I talk about interstitial cystitis too, all right? And then finally, in terms of mast cells and histamines and all that, I did mention mast cell activation, take a look at my chapter on the immune system. And there's 2 articles I'll point out here. One is how to control cytokines. And in this one, you'll find the information I mentioned about quercetin, okay? And then there's this other article I've written called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome in Lyme, okay? So you can read a lot more about how mast cells get overactivated when you have chronic infections, making it look like you have really bad allergic conditions sometimes. And that's due to this thing called mast cell activation, of which quercetin is a very useful one of the things that you can give to help with that, all right? All right, so back here again. Let's see, let me clean up Gail's questions here. All right, let's see here. Hello, Kumar. All right, hi, Kumar. Let's see, terminology clarification. Is there a difference between Lyme and neuroborreliosis? I even stumbled on that one myself. Neuroborreliosis, thank you very much. Let's see here. If one's Lyme symptoms are mainly arthritic, fatigue, and a few neurologic symptoms, would it be officially called neuroborreliosis? On a different note, have you had any experience with antigraphis or hyaluronic acid as part of a Lyme regimen? Okay. So neuroborreliosis, everyone, means Lyme in the nervous system, okay? Now, typically when people are using that term, what they're referring to is more severe neurologic Lyme, all right? That would be things like multiple sclerosis Lyme or Lou Gehrig's disease Lyme, or people that have severe thinking problems, people that get seizures, people that have bad Alzheimer's disease caused by Lyme. You could call that neuroborreliosis, okay? You could, all right? Now, technically, everyone has some Lyme that gets into the brain, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has a strong manifestation of that or strong symptoms to that, but Lyme actually crosses into the brain after it's in you, I think within a few hours. It's actually pretty quickly after you get your bite, it's already crossing over into the brain, all right? So anyone that has Lyme has it in their brain. Now, that doesn't mean that they have severe symptoms related to getting into the brain. We usually reserve, again, the term, the neuroborreliosis, for those situations where it's more of a severe neurologic condition, okay? But technically, everyone's got some of it in their brain to a degree, okay? All right. Now, in terms of antigraphis, so antigraphis is a herb that I know Buhner, as in Buhner Herbs. Buhner is a master herbalist that talks about a lot of things you can do for Lyme and the co-infections, all right? He will use antigraphis in his treatments. And but I actually spent some time reading his book about Lyme over this last week. And he even notes he only finds it works about 60% of the time, okay? But he still will use it because there is a chance it can work. My sense of using antigraphis is probably about 60% of the time. So I usually don't build it into my treatments. You'll see if you look at my newly republished, newly rewritten Lyme disease antibiotic guide. Many of you may know that I actually republished it, rewrote the whole thing, and put it up earlier this week. That I mentioned that I actually tend not to do the main protocols of what Buhner does, which is the Andrographis, cat's claw, and Japanese knotweed together. I think there are some other herbal options that work better than those. And I mentioned those in my Lyme disease antibiotic guide. You can take a look at those, okay? But they're valid things to try. And for some people, they can make a difference. But even he notes the Andrographis works about 60% of the time. And that would reflect my experience as well, too. In terms of the hyaluronic acid, that is a chemical you can give to help rebuild the connective tissue, the tissues that hold things together in the body. Keep in mind that Lyme likes to live in connection tissue, so sometimes it'll break down the connection tissue. And there's some people that advocate using the hyaluronic acid to help rebuild that. To be honest, I just haven't seen that greater results from it. I don't know that it would or would not work. Okay? All right. So let me just do a quick screen share because I did mention it to you earlier here. All right, so back at TreatLine. So in terms of, so I do periodically I am aggressively rewriting and redrafting parts of TreatLine right now. And so if you're trying to keep up on a day-to-day basis, trying to see what has he updated, you could go to the homepage here. You can do that just by clicking up here on this TreatLine, okay? That'll bring you back to this page, the homepage, all right? At least it's trying to. And if you scroll all the way down here to the bottom, it'll tell you the most recent 2 articles that I did, okay? So my 2 most recent ones are I rewrote the Lyme disease antibiotic guide article, and I rewrote my article about how do you get rid of FBC, okay? So both of these are, they're based on earlier versions, but they're significantly redone. I would take a look at both of those if you're just looking for some new ways that I'm approaching both of these infections, okay? Now, I should also tell you one of the things I'm working towards is coming out with a guide that is just a guide that will, a printable guide. It's something that you can buy and download that will, actually, let me go back here. So again, what I'm trying to do is come up with a printable guide of all of my infection treatment plans. And that those plans will be my guides about what do you use to kill certain germs, what works best, what doesn't, okay? I'm trying to edit the old articles I have and update them on my way to creating a publication that you'll be able to buy and download that will be just my infection treatment plans, okay? So keep an eye out for that sometime in the next week or so. I hope to have that done, week and a half or so. I hope to have that done and published in a way that you all can get your hand, be able to see that and have it in your hands. Actually, you'll be able to print it off and have it for your own use. Okay? All right. Kumar, thank you for that question. I appreciate that. Let's see here. All right. Hello, Kristen. Let's see. I recently tested positive through Armin Labs for Borrelia and co-infections. I decided to have my husband and 3 children tested as well. All 4 have varying degrees of cellular activity towards Lyme and co-infections. My question is, should we treat everyone for all infections regardless of symptoms in hopes of ridding infections completely or treat based on symptoms only? 2 are virtually symptom-free. I worry about neurologic damage, which may take years to develop and could be difficult to reverse. Secondly, should my decision be based on the level of cellular activity, i.e. treat everyone who has a result of 3 or greater? Thank you for the information you provide. Okay, so it's a good question. It's a complicated question, actually. And I'm going to give you my opinion. It's my opinion, okay, that you could talk with other Lyme experts. They might have different ideas on this because the truth is we don't have a lot of research to guide us here, okay? I can only reflect what I have based on experience, all right? So when you refer to cellular activity, I want to kind of state what I think you mean by that, all right? So everyone, Armin Labs does one of the tests they do is something called an ELISpot test. And what an ELISpot test does is it measures whether you are, whether a type of white blood cell called a T cell. T cells are types of white blood cells that will fight Lyme, okay? It's measuring whether your T cells actually remember fighting Lyme. have they been fighting Lyme? Okay. And the way that the test is done is we take white blood cells, your T cells, we take them out of your blood, and we expose them in the lab to Lyme proteins. And then we see, do they release a lot of cytokines? And when we're measuring is the degree of cytokines that they release. Okay, so the increased activity you're talking about, the 3+ means they released a lot of cytokines. Okay, now it's hard to say if the degree of cytokines that your white blood cells release means anything about how much Lyme or Lyme is not in the body. All that it says is your white blood cells have been reacting. Okay. And they might be reacting so strongly that they've got it all under control. All right. So 3+ may mean, wow, what a great immune reaction you've had. Your immune system is doing what it's supposed to. All right. So 3+ does not mean you got more germ out of control. Now, on the other hand, it could. It may mean that your immune system is working so hard because the germ's out of control. But it's not as easy as to say that. Okay. So for instance, you could have a little bit of germ in you and a great immune reaction. That would be a 3+. The other thing, sometimes you can have a lot of germ in you, but you have immune suppression, so the immune system is having a hard time doing it. You might get a 1+ response. So the degree of response tells you nothing about the germ load. They don't correlate together. Okay. All right. Now, some doctors think it does. I don't, because all that you're really measuring is the immune reaction. And every one of us have immune systems that work differently. So some of us have immune systems that work strongly and do a great job of keeping germs under control. Sometimes we don't have immune systems that don't work as strongly. Okay. All right. All right. So then to answer the rest of your question, I have to pose a question. All right. So what is the objective in treating Lyme? So the idea is with the Lyme germ, now I'm going to talk about Bartonella and Babesia co-infections separately, okay? But with the Lyme germ, if somebody has had those in them for a year or more, I don't think we ever eradicate the germ. I don't think we ever get rid of the germ, okay? I think the best we're doing with our antibiotics is to knock the germ load down to the point that the immune system can keep the germ under control, okay? So generally, when it comes to Lyme, even if somebody's got a positive test and they don't have any symptoms of Lyme, I don't treat. There's also the risk that with a positive test and without symptoms, that it's a false positive test. Yes, even Armin labs can be wrong. You can have false positive tests. You can have tests that show up and say a test is positive but have no symptoms. Okay, so the predictability of any test is increased if you have a lot of symptoms of the illness. Okay, so the more symptoms you have of Lyme means there's a greater chance that that positive test you get for Lyme is real. It is not a false positive. All right. So generally, when I've got somebody that has a positive test but low symptoms or no symptoms, I'm going to tend to not treat with herbal or prescription antibiotics. All right. And in the case of Lyme, one of the reasons I say that too is keep in mind that when you use prescription antibiotics or herbal antibiotics, there's a time and place to do it. The time to do it is if you need to knock your germ load down, okay? But keep in mind that anytime we challenge the germ, we may create resistance in that germ. The germ could get more active as it tries to figure out how to beat the herbal or prescription antibiotics, okay? So if you use antibiotics when there's not a good reason, it's possible. No one's done research on this, but it's possible you could create a stronger germ. So I try to be very judicious and careful about when to use antibiotics if somebody doesn't have signs of an infection. Again, the goal is to get the germ under control so you don't have signs, okay? So regarding Lyme, if I've got somebody that has minimal symptoms and or no symptoms, and I have a positive test, I may not give anything, or I may work more through the immune system to help support and get the germ under control. All right. So I might do things like make sure a person's getting a good 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That boosts the immune system. Okay. Second thing I would do is lower cytokines, because excess cytokines actually suppress the immune system. So I do a curcumin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. All right. I might work with ashwagandha. That's shown to help improve function of the immune system. I know Buhner likes using ashwagandha for that purpose. I like using it as an adaptogen. Helps the body deal with stress. So ashwagandha, adult dosing would be 400 milligrams, 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills at nighttime. Okay. And then I might even consider using something called transfer factors. Transfer factors are proteins made by white blood cells that will target the immune system to attack certain germs. And you can get a transfer factor mix that is targeted for Lyme and the co-infections. That's called transfer factor L+. It's made by a company called Research Nutritionals. And in an adult, it would be 1 pill twice a day. Okay? All right, so all the comments I just made for you right now are about Lyme. All right, now, Bartonella and Babesia, I actually do think we can get rid of those. And I think Bartonella we can get rid of about 90 to 95% of the time. And I think Babesia, we have the same chance of success on that too. Now, having said that, though, I don't know I would rush. If you got somebody that has minimal symptoms of both of those, what I might do is still work with the immune supports the way that I just said. And keep in mind that transfer factor L+ also has in it transfer factors that target Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, some viruses that occur in Lyme disease as well too. Okay, all right. So those are just my thoughts on that. Okay, now let me. I'm just going to do a quick screen share for you and show you a couple of things here. Okay, so back here at TreatLine. All right, so I'm going to just point out this is my Lyme disease treatment protocol or my Lyme disease treatment guidelines. Okay. And I call it the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. The first 10 steps of my Lyme disease support protocol, my Lyme disease treatment guideline, are the things that you should do to boost your immune system. Okay? And they're simple things. Number one, get sleep. I give you some ideas of prescriptions and herbs you can do to do that. Okay? Number two, be on a healthy diet. I prefer a paleo diet. I think paleo does better for your immune system. Helps limit chances of getting yeast, etc. Okay. Number three, lower cytokines. And I like using curcumin to do that, as many of you know. You can also use combinations of herbs, like in a product called Cytoquel by Research Nutritionals, or some things you can that are combinations of herbs that lower those. Okay. Number four, be on an adaptogen. And I like ashwagandha to do that. I know Buhner, for instance, builds it into his Lyme disease treatments because he talks about it stimulating the immune system as well too. All right. Number five, figure out if you've got low hormones, and if you do, correct those. Be on a good multivitamin. Do some basic detox steps. And if you're pretty healthy, you may not need to do this, but if you are having symptoms, I like people to be on glutathione, which helps support liver detox. Okay. If you can exercise to boost your immune system, do that. In terms of immune boosters, other than I usually as part of my protocol say not to do them just because the whole protocol is devoted at boosting the immune system, but you can use transfer factors, as I mentioned earlier too. Okay. Number 10, get yeast out. And steps 11 and 12 are about how you treat your infections. All right. So if you're looking at herbal ways, I give you both herbal and prescription options here for Lyme. And I also give you herbal and prescription ideas here for Bartonella and for Babesia too. All right. So that'll give you some ideas there. In terms of testing, everyone, if you're wondering what is this ELISpot that I was just talking about, take a look at my chapter on test. Okay. And take a look at this article called Lyme Infection Test, Pass or Fail. And in here, I also talk about, in this article about how I don't treat based just on a test. Okay. All right. Let's see here. One other thing I'll show you. I'm going to go to my immune chapter. All right. So I talked earlier tonight about transfer factors. If you want to hear more about those, take a look at this article called Transfer Factors Turn on the Army. And in here, I describe what is the best transfer factor to use for Lyme, which is transfer factor Lyme Plus. I also talk about what's the best transfer factors to use for viruses, which is called transfer factor plasmic. If you're wondering how to use transfer factors, take a look at this article. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right, Kristen, I hope that gives you some things to think about. Okay. Now, one last thing. You mentioned you're worried about what could happen down the road. All right. So it's not clear that everyone that has Lyme is going to develop dementia. Okay. It's not clear that everyone that has Lyme will develop a worsening situation over time. No one's done research to show that. And I can't say from personal experience either. But if I've got somebody I think that has Lyme, and I'm going to do the things to boost the immune system, like I was just showing, I'm going to have a lifestyle set up that people will lead to keep their immune system active and healthy. And that would be following those steps that I just mentioned. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Good luck to your family, too. Hello, Charlene. Let's see. Dr. Klinghardt in the Klinghardt Academy announcement, retroviral treatment for Lyme, autism, persistent infections, and antimicrobial protocols, dental solutions, and much more. Let's see. Oh, I think there's a second part you have. Hold on here, Matt. That was not a full question. Let me go back here. I think this may be the full question. Let's see. Dr. Klinghardt. Let's see. Okay, so you say that Dr. Klinghardt announced the retroviral treatment of Lyme autism, persistent infections, antimicrobial protocols, dental solutions, and much more. Judy Malkovich discovered retroviruses. Her book, P. Plague, is a very interesting read. Do you think someone who cannot get well could have retroviruses, as this is serious, happened decades ago and kept silent? Thanks for hanging in when times are hard for you with your fight to keep your medical license, and I do hope it's going well. Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate that. So the fight goes on. So my medical board has everything they need, and I wrote a very compelling argument, and we'll see where it goes from here. Okay, but thank you for that. In terms of viruses, so viruses, including retroviruses, including Epstein-Barr virus, including parvovirus B19, including something called human herpes virus type 6 and human herpes virus type 8, something called cytomegalovirus. These are all viruses that actually are common even in healthy people. Okay, so the trouble with viruses, a lot of these, even retroviruses, is that they can be found in healthy people. And just finding viruses in you or evidence of viruses in you does not mean they're causing the problem. Now, can they cause a problem? Yeah, they can, okay? But a lot of my colleagues like to test antibodies to see, do you have evidence of human herpes virus type 6 or the monovirus or retroviruses or Coxsackie viruses, any of those viruses, all right? And so remember I said that there's actually been studies done that show that even healthy people have evidence of these viruses living in them. And if you were to do antibody testing on 100 healthy people, you'd find 10 to 20% that have elevated antibodies being made by their immune system against these viruses, probably even the retrovirus too, right? So the question is well, how do we know if viruses are causing a problem, right? Because it's only if they truly are causing a problem, if they are made in a way that your immune system can't keep them under control, that we probably should do something about them. Okay, so if we measure antibodies, the best we can say is your immune system is reacting against them. The degree of the immune reaction does not tell us for sure, have the viruses gotten out of control? Have they grown beyond a level that the immune system can control them and that they're hurting us, okay? So there is not a good way, traditionally, we haven't had a good way to measure a viral load. What is the load of viruses in your body, all right? But there is an experimental test that we can do that I've started using in the last year, a couple of years actually, and that is to measure an enzyme level, something called nagalase. Nagalase is an enzyme that is made in the coverings of viruses. It's an enzyme, and what it does is it deactivates a chemical called GCMAF that is supposed to turn on a type of white blood cell called a macrophage that fights viruses. Also fights cancer cells as well too, okay? So what happens is if there's a lot of viruses, they're going to be making a lot of this GCMAF to make sure that those macrophages don't get turned on to fight them. And we can measure the nagalase, all right? So there's a lab out in New Jersey called Health Diagnostics that measures nagalase levels. And I like using their test. I have found that if I've got somebody that has a nagalase above 1.2, that it's useful to treat for virus infections, okay? All right. Now, it doesn't even tell me which the virus is that's increased. It just says they got active viruses in them. So my approach for treating viruses is to use olive leaf extract, to use transfer factor, plasmic transfer factors against viruses, and reishi mushrooms. I like using mushrooms as a means of turning on viruses too, okay? So my approach is don't measure the antibodies, measure agalase, see if you have increased viral load in general in the body. And if you do, attack them by killing them with olive leaf extract and then boosting the immune system and targeting the immune system, target with transfer factors and boost it with reishi gano mushrooms. All right. So I've got a whole article about the testing and treatment of viruses. It's all in the same article, actually. Let me show you that. You can take a look at this later for some of the details about how to use those herbs that I just mentioned. All right, so take a look at my infection treatment plans chapter. And if you scroll all the way down here, there's a guide called When and How to Treat Chronic Viruses, a brief guide. Okay, so this is my approach to how I handle viruses. All right. All right, let me go back here again. All right. Thanks, Charlene. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. I hope that gave you something to think about there. Let's see. Hi, Casey. Let's see. I've been watching your webinars for a couple of years now, and I've learned a lot. One thing I haven't heard you or anybody else mention is semi-elemental or elemental diet. I just recently learned about the semi-elemental diet, and it has helped relieve my gut, bloating, fullness, and digestion when nothing else has. I have been replacing about 50% of my meals and snacks with it and just eating breakfast and dinner. Do you have any thoughts on this diet? It's a liquid diet designed for SIBO patients, which I believe I have. The one I use is FMF Elemental Heal, designed by Dr. Ruscio. Thanks. So I don't know the specific diet. In other words, the one from Dr. Ruscio, okay? But an elemental diet means it's foods that have been broken down much more into their elemental forms so that they're more easily going to be digested. So no, I haven't talked much about it. I can't comment about this specific one, but the general idea, if you're having indigestion or poor digestion, which can be seen with gas, the kind of gassiness you're getting in SIBO, an elemental diet can be helpful. That's the best I can say. Okay? All right. Thanks, Casey. Good luck to you. Hello, Janice. Let's see. I have more co-infections. Ehrlichiosis. Mycoplasma fermentans. Oh, I think you mean mycoplasma fermentans and anaplasmosis. Any thoughts regarding treatment with supplements and herbs? So I would take a look. So in terms of ehrlichiosis and anaplasmosis, so let me talk about those first, okay? So as I have looked at herbal options to actually get rid of them, to kill them, I don't find good ones. I know that Buhner talks about some ideas, but even he'll mention in his books that there isn't science that says they work. He's kind of coming up with ideas off the top of his head, but I just haven't found herbs that helpful for those two. When it comes to ehrlichiosis and anaplasmosis, Ehrlichia and anaplasma, the science suggests, and what I have found clinically, is that usually 2 weeks to 4 weeks of using either doxycycline or rifampin, the prescription antibiotics, will be enough to eradicate those, and you're not going to have any more problem. Okay? I just want to say that. 2 to 4 weeks. They're pretty simple infections to treat. Okay? Now, mycoplasma fermentans, like you're mentioning here, is an intracellular infection. The doxy or the rifampin will help. But typically mycoplasma, we're probably going to need to treat for about maybe a month to even 4 months. And the antibiotics that work best on mycoplasma are ones that get inside of cells. And those would be things like the tetracyclines or the macrolides, which is Zithromax and Biaxin or rifampin. Those are all good choices. And it might be 1 or 2 of those used together for 4 months. All right. Now, keep in mind, if your doctor has been designing a treatment to treat your Lyme, your physician has probably been using intracellular antibiotics because we need to treat Lyme that lives inside of cells too. These are antibiotics that get inside of cells, okay? And if you've been treating intracellular Lyme for 4 months to 6 months or so, you probably have dealt with your mycoplasma. even if they are still measuring antibodies. Okay, so a lot of doctors make the mistake of finding that if you have elevated IgG antibodies, so IgG is a type of antibody that you'll develop and maintain, keep, even after an infection is gone. Okay, so there's two families of antibodies we get in infection. There's IgMs, IgGs. IgMs are what we develop first. They're supposed to go away, except in Lyme they don't. About 80% of the time in Lyme, they will still be there after 3 to 6 months. But in most infections, they're going to go away by 3 to 6 months. And then they get replaced by IgG antibodies. Once we make IgGs, they are the memory of the immune system. And just finding IgGs does not mean you have an active infection. It means your immune system has been dealing with it or dealt with it. Okay, so in other words, it could be out if you have IgG antibodies. All right, so just keep that in mind. Okay, all right, and so if you have been treated for Lyme and your doctors have been using intracellular antibiotics, which is the doxycyclines, rifampin, Bactrim, rifamycins like rifampin and rifabutin, and you've done those for about 4 months or so continuous, you'll probably have dealt with your mycoplasma as well too. Okay. So let me just do a quick screen share for you here. And again, Anaplasma ehrlichia should be pretty straightforward to take care of. We usually don't see relapses on those, and they seem to be straightforward too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do a quick screen here. So again, I have been, as I've mentioned, I've been updating articles on TreatLine over the last week or two. And so in terms of Anaplasma and ehrlichia, I actually have an article about those now. And you can take a look at it here. It's this article called Kills Anaplasma and Ehrlichia, a Brief Guide. Okay, so I review the science, even talk about Buhner here a little bit. That's the article you would want to take a look at. All right. Thanks, Janice. Good luck to you. Hello, Kathy. Let's see. Something again. So within 1 week, Lyme symptoms came back. Made each joint swell and hurt, especially my left ankle, my left knee. My emotions went haywire too. Kathy, I think I'm missing part of your question. See, hold on. So I'm trying to see if there's a. All right, Kenny, I think I see another part to your question. It's a little bit later after that one, so I'm not sure if this is the beginning of your first question or not, but I'll post this one because I think it makes a little more sense here. All right, let's see. After 10 years, can Lyme rear its ugly face after aerobic exercise? It did for me. Scary as anything. Just wanted your opinion. Also, what do you suggest for the still lingering knee pain in the right knee? Okay, so can Lyme relapse? The answer is yes. All right, so as I mentioned earlier tonight, when you treat Lyme and you get it under control, and if you've had Lyme in you for a year or more, I think that most people, it probably still is in you. The best we've done is knock the germ load down, and the immune system is keeping it under control. Right? That means that people can relapse at times. Okay. Now, a couple things though I want to point out. Often, what looks like a Lyme relapse is not. Okay, so Lyme can relapse, but not everything that looks like a Lyme relapse is a relapse. Okay, so remember what Lyme disease symptoms are is they are symptoms of too many cytokines. So if you start feeling worse, you need to see, is there anything else giving you those increased cytokines? And one of the big culprits that can look just like Lyme is if you develop too many yeast in your intestines. And if you were on antibiotics 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, and you had antibiotics back then, that leaves you as a setup over time to develop too many yeast in the intestines, okay? And if you get too many yeast in the intestines, the immune system sees them and makes more cytokines, all right? And those cytokines make it so you can't sleep, make it so you can't think, make you hurt all over, give you fatigue, etc., etc. They give you Lyme symptoms. So the first thing I would do before you jump down the hole of starting to treat Lyme infection again, is I would consider if you have yeast. And things that make me wonder about yeast are increased sugar cravings. Do you have worsened skin rashes for some reason, or not for some reason? Whenever you have yeast in your intestines, they release toxins that interact with your skin and can give you worsened skin rashes, can give you pimples and acne. Okay. Sometimes if you have too many yeast and you're a woman, you might have vaginal itching, vaginal discharge. You can have increased intestinal gasiness or bloating. Sometimes when people have yeast, they have a hard time swallowing because it's even up in the food pipe. Okay. All right. So if you have a number of those symptoms, you might want to treat yeast first. If not, maybe you need to start treating Lyme. All right. Now, in terms of your knee pain, if it's chronic knee pain and it didn't just get worse with your exercise here, so if it's acutely worse, it could be cytokines. In which case, you want to lower those cytokines. Follow the steps I have in my Ross Lyme support protocol. Use curcumin. Okay, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. But sometimes lingering knee pain means that Lyme broke down the cartilage in your knee. And wherever two bones come together in the knee, those surfaces are supposed to be covered by cartilage. Cartilage has two functions. Number one, it acts as a shock absorber, keeps the bones from hitting on each other, okay? Second thing it does is it's smooth, so it allows bones to glide over each other easily. But cartilage in your joints is a lot softer than the bone it covers, and it can wear down over time, and then you get bone rubbing on bone. Also, Lyme will break down cartilage in your joints too, and you get bone rubbing on bone. And bone rubbing on bone hurts, and it leads to inflammation, okay? So sometimes you can actually rebuild that cartilage, and you can do so using glucosamine sulfate. Glucosamine sulfate, as I mentioned earlier, for the bladder, and when I talk about interstitial cystitis, is useful for covering the lining of the bladder, but also it's used to make cartilage. 500 milligrams 3 times a day will help rebuild cartilage. Give it a 3-month try. It takes about 3 months to see if it's going to work. It works about maybe 70, 80% of the time. Okay, so that might be something for you to think about trying as well too. Okay, all right. Now I'm just going to show you a quick article you can take a look at here. All right, I think it's an article I have in the yeast chapter. Let me just see for sure. Yeah, this one here. So take a look at this article called Steps to Fix a Lyme Treatment Crash. This is where I talk about that if you get worse all of a sudden, even after you've been better, think yeast, and I talk about how do you diagnose it, etc. Okay? All right. All right, there we go. All right, Kathy, good luck to you. I hope that answered your question. I don't think I'm finding all of your question, but I hope that was the main part of it. Hello, Wendy. Let's see. Thank you for doing these webinars. You're welcome. I find them really informative. Question, your thoughts on pulsing antibiotics versus full-time antibiotics. Think you are a legend. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to help people. I've got a lot of knowledge that I've gained here in the last since 2004 when I first started treating Lyme, and before that I focused on chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. So it's kind of all in the same ballpark of illnesses. So I just want to help as many people as possible. But thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. All right. So in terms of pulsing antibiotics, I don't have. Well, there's two. Let's try to figure out where to jump in here. So let's talk about. Let me talk about a piece of research about it first. Okay, so we back about 2 or 3 years ago now, there was a study published out of Northeastern University in Boston that showed that when people are continuously on, or when Lyme germs are continuously exposed to antibiotics, they will develop into what are called persister forms, persister Lyme. Okay. And what persister Lyme is a form of a spirochete, form of cyst that slow their metabolism way, way down, and they essentially go into hibernation, and they just ignore the antibiotics, okay? And according to those Petri dish experiments, that was about 20% of the germs. So 20% of the cyst, 20% of the spirochetes go into hibernation. That's called a persister form, okay? The other thing that happens in a persister situation is more of the germs will move into biofilm communities as well, too. Okay? All right. Now, in those Northeastern University studies, what they showed is that if you started and stopped the antibiotics, if you pulsed the antibiotics, you could, after 4 rounds of starting and stopping, you could wipe all of the germs out. So that started everyone thinking, aha, the way to deal with persistent Lyme and people not getting better is to pulse the antibiotics, okay? All right. Now, and I used to try to do regimens that were like 4 days on, 3 days off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I experimented with all kinds of ways. And in general, that short kind of pulsing for days on and weeks off didn't really seem to make a difference, okay? Now, there's been some subsequent research that has been done by a guy named Ying Zhang, Dr. Ying Zhang, who is a tuberculosis researcher that has now shifted the focus of his lab at Johns Hopkins University to dealing with persister Lyme, because his expertise was in tuberculosis, which also has persisters. So he wanted to take that knowledge and turn it over to focusing on Lyme, okay? And what Ying Zhang has been showing in his lab is that it's not about pulsing. He doesn't think pulsing works based on his Petri dish experiments. What his Petri dish experiments are showing is that it's about the combination of antibiotics you use, okay? So for instance, he's published some stuff that shows that the combination of cefuroxime, which is an antibiotic, and doxycycline, and Bactrim, a sulfa antibiotic, those 3 used continuously treat persistent Lyme, and pulsing doesn't work. Okay, that's Ying Zhang's recent work. Okay, so I like to think of pulsing in 2 ways. Then, and as I've come to look at this, I've looked at it as something called short pulsing and something called long pulsing. Okay, short pulsing means a few days on, few days off, a week on, week off. Okay, long pulsing is a month to 2 months off, and a month to 2 months on. All right, and more like 2 months off, 2 months on. Although some people, they just can't handle that kind of a regimen. They get worse too quickly, okay? So where did I come up with that one from? Well, that's based on an experience that Dr. Burrascano had. Many of you may know Burrascano. He's one of the Lyme pioneers that pioneered Lyme treatment out on the East Coast. He hasn't practiced now about 5 or 6 years, but before he stopped practicing, he was starting to treat people with regimens where he would stop antibiotics and let them get really sick. That's about 2 months. And then after they got really sick, he'd start using antibiotics again for about 2 months. And he did this kind of pulsing of about 2 months on, 2 months off for about 4 rounds. And he claims he was able to cure his own Lyme and that he cured other people's Lyme, okay? And what he theorized, this is before we had research showing persister cells in Lyme, okay? What he theorized is that when Lyme was exposed to antibiotics for a while, it would just ignore it. Well, that sounds like a persister cell, doesn't it? It sounds like the persister research I was just telling you about, right? So one of the approaches I will use as part of treating persister cells and persister Lyme is to do a 2 month on, 2 month off regimen. Now, I have had some people get some really good results doing that, okay? But maybe that's about 20% or 30% of people that get good results that way. Not everyone does, okay? I had a patient of mine that I treated for a few years with oral antibiotics. She got energy that went from 0 out of 10 to 2 out of 10. And within 3 rounds of doing this 2 month on, 2 month off, she wound up getting energy up to 8 out of 10. And that was the thing that worked for her, okay? So long pulsing, I think, is something I support. Short pulsing in general, I don't. Except when it comes to using metronidazole and tinidazole, okay? So those are 2 antibiotics that we can use to treat cyst Lyme and also can treat Lyme that lives inside of cells, intracellular Lyme. They may even help with spirochetes to a degree too. If you look at some of the Petri dish research, although I wouldn't use those to target spirochetes necessarily, all right? Those 2 antibiotics are pretty toxic to the liver. And so to protect the liver, what I like doing with those is a 4-day on, 3-day off. But I'm not using it that way to pulse for persister Lyme. I'm using it that way to protect the liver, okay? All right, so that's a lot of stuff I just said. There's a couple places you can come back and look at this later, okay? So there is, let me just do a quick screen share here. All right, so a lot of what I was just talking about is how do you treat persister Lyme, okay? I talked about Ying Zhang's work. I talked about Burrascano's 2 month on, 2 month off. More recently, Dr. I'm going to blank on his name here for a minute. Dr. Horowitz has been working with a drug called Deathzone to treat persistent Lyme. All right. So if you want to look at what do you do for persistent Lyme, take a look at my chapter, The Infection Treatment Plans, in this article called How to Treat Persistent Lyme. And in here, I review some of Ying Zhang's work. I talk about lung pulsing, like a Burskana type approach. And I even review the Deathzone that Dr. Horowitz has been using more recently. Okay? All right. All right. Wendy, I hope that answered. I know it's a long-winded response, but I needed to put it in context for you too. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Pamela. See, if a patient is on fentanyl and diflucan is contraindicated, what do you do in this case if the yeast problems develop? Great, thanks for all you do. Best of luck with the board. Thank you. So, Pamela, so the issue with diflucan and fentanyl is that the actually I have to. It's going to interfere with fentanyl, and I got the metabolism, and I need to look up exactly in what way. So hold on here just a minute. I need to see which way it interferes with it, other than knowing it does. Just a minute. So fentanyl. If what I'm looking down is I have a drug directory on my phone. It used to be we used to have books. Now we have it all on our phone. So let me just see what the interaction is here exactly. It's not making it easy for me to see. Hold on here a minute. Well, if it's an interaction, it looks like it's going to be more of a minor interaction. Let me get to the minor interaction one. This device that I have breaks it into major, medium, and minor. And I just went through the pages about medium and major, and I didn't see it. And there's a page that says caution advised. You know, it's not showing up here. I'm not sure why they're telling you there's an interaction problem. So I'm not sure. I probably have to talk to the pharmacist. The pharmacy has seen it, but it's not showing up as a regular interaction that I'm seeing on my device. I assume it has something to do with liver metabolism and how these two drugs interact with each other. Okay. So to answer your question, if you've got something like a fentanyl and you can't take a diflucan, one thing that you can do is look more natural. So first of all, you can use a prescription, which is nystatin. Nystatin stays in the intestines. It is not systemically absorbed. It will not interfere with liver metabolism at all. It's 500,000 international unit pill, 2 pills twice a day. And then I would add an herbal mixture to that too. My favorite these days, if we have it again, they were out of production for a while, is a product that has caprylic acid in it, some rosemary oil, and some garlic in it. It's a product called Capri Plus. That's CAPRIPLUS. That I would use a couple pills twice a day. And that is not going to do any kind of interactions with your fentanyl as well, too. Okay? The problem is if diflucan is going to interfere with fentanyl, any of the other medications that we would use to treat yeast generally going to come out of that family, the stronger ones, they're going to be a problem as well, too. All right? So that's why I'm kind of looking more natural for you. But again, I just don't see what the interaction is here. I probably have to talk to the pharmacy directly about that. All right? All right. So let me just show you so you know what I'm talking about here too. I'm going to do a quick screen share. Okay, so tonight I know I mentioned a number of supplements. If you're wondering what brands do I use for liposomal curcumin, or what is this Capri Plus product I just mentioned, you can take a look here at Marty Ross MD supplements. This is a store I've used for my existing patients. but also is available to anyone. Anyone could buy from the store. All right. So the Capri Plus is made by a company called Karuna, and it's a very effective herbal product. So that's the product right there. Okay. All right. So I just point that out. And again, I have glutathione here. We have curcumin here. Anything you would need, we have available for you here. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. Oops, I guess I didn't do a screen share. Anyhow, I hope you all saw that. Actually, I don't think I did a screen share. Let me try that again. No, it looks like I did not. Let me just go back here again. Okay, so this is the product at Marty Ross MD Supplements. Again, you can search for any of the supplements I recommend through here. Okay, all right. Let me go back here again. All right, there you go. Good luck to you, Pamela. Thank you. Hello, Marge. Let's see. Hey, Dr. Ross. I have been on multiple rounds of antibiotics for Lyme over the past 3 years. I am having a lot of trouble with numbing in my one foot and nerve pain. Anything you would suggest for this? Yeah. A couple things that you might want to think about. Okay. So when you have Lyme infection, one of the things that can happen is you can actually get direct injury of the nerves from it, okay? And so you can repair them. But repair involves actually fixing the covering of the nerve as well as fixing the mitochondria energy factories on the inside, okay? So the product that does that, the nerve covering itself is made up of a double layer of fat. The energy factories called mitochondria generate energy to help us run. I mean, it's what gives all of our cells energy. But if your nerves are injured, that often means you have mitochondria injury as well too. And so you need to fix the mitochondria so the nerves can heal. Okay. And so my approach for that is to use two main things. There's other things I'll do too, but the two things I would emphasize are something called NT factor. It's NT factor phospholipids. It's made up of the fats that make up your mitochondria membrane covering, so you can fix your energy factories so you can start having energy for your nerves to heal. Okay. Also will repair the outer covering of the nerves as well too. That's NT factor, 2 pills 3 times a day. Okay. Studies show that after you've been on that for at least 2 months, there's average energy improvements of about 40%. There's no one that's done studies to show does it fix nerves. My clinical experience is it does. Okay. Second thing I would do is get on liposomal glutathione. So liposomal glutathione means it's glutathione that's microscopically wrapped in fat. Glutathione is an antioxidant that is made in every one of our cells, and its purpose is to fix damage. Now, if your nerves are injured, they probably have used up their glutathione supply because they've been trying to fix themselves from the inside, okay? So you have to give glutathione back. You got to fill up the glutathione tank. And so what I would do is liposomal glutathione. I like a product by Research Nutritionals called TriFortify. I have people take 5 milliliters of that 1 time a day. All right. So those are two kind of the essential things that I would do. If you want to go one step further, I would add coenzyme Q10, 400 milligrams twice a day. CoQ10 helps carry electrons around your mitochondria so they work better, giving you more energy. Okay. All right, so those are 3 things I would consider. Okay, finally, if you've got, if it is in just one area, I wouldn't do this next one. But if you have a lot of body pain in other areas, you might also consider adding in something called low-dose naltrexone. Naltrexone is a narcotic blocker. It's used to treat people with drug overdoses, but we can use it in Lyme because if we use it to block our own natural narcotics, which are called endorphins, and if we provide a temporary block of the endorphin receptors in our body, what happens is those endorphin receptors then become more sensitive to the endorphins we make. And while you're under blockade with the naltrexone, your endorphin cells, produced cells, make a lot more. So what happens is as the naltrexone wears off, the endorphin receptors that are now more responsive and sensitive to endorphins get flooded with excess endorphins. And what that can do is it can help regulate nerve pain, and it can also help regulate inflammation in the body and turn it down. Okay, so there's a whole article I've written that has a lot more detail than that in it about low dose naltrexone. That might be something for you to take a look at as well too, because those will be 2 thoughts for you. All right, so fix your mitochondria. Second thought would be consider doing low dose naltrexone. All right, so let me just show you a quick share on that one so you can see where you get more information about that. Okay, so take a look at chapter on brain and nerves. And I would take a look at this article. Oh, here. Take a look at this article called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain. I talk about CoQ10, I talk about glutathione, I talk about the NT factor here. Okay, so take a look at that article, all right? In terms of low-dose naltrexone, let's see, looks like I did not add it to this page. Where you can find about that one, look under this immune system article and take a look at this article called LDN for Lyme, all right? I talk about using it to help regulate the immune system as well as control pain in Lyme disease. Okay? All right. All right. Good luck to you, Marge. And thank you for that question. Hello, B. Let's see. I've been on antibiotics for 14 months. Morgellons, Lyme, mold toxicity. Morgellons slough off, keratin shreds have diminished in size, and the transudate has diminished as well. Other symptoms remain: severe aches, joints, swollen glands, sinus headaches. My practitioner says Morgellons won't get better if I'm continually exposed to mold. I tested positive and have high values on mold DNA test. How would I tell if the symptoms are yeast or from Lyme, Morgellons, mold? How to treat if yeast? Good question. So generally, one of the things I will do, I think I made a comment earlier tonight that if you happen to have too many yeast in your intestines, it will make any skin manifestations worse. All right, that even means your Morgellons will be worse too. So generally, as part of a treatment approach that I would use for somebody with Morgellons, I would try to do a good systemic, meaning intestinal yeast treatment for at least a month as part of treating Morgellons, okay? So I would look at doing the recommendations I have in my yeast treatment articles, which is nystatin, 500,000 international units, 2 pills twice a day. I'd get on diflucan, 200 milligrams, 1 pill a day for 30 days, and be on probiotics, okay? So I would probably just build that in, deal with the yeast issue, okay? Now, the high values on the mold DNA test, I would need to know more exactly what test they're looking at, okay? If your practitioner is following ideas by Dr. Richie Shoemaker is the guy that came up with mold toxicity. Shoemaker tends to see if you have a genetic predisposition for having trouble removing mold toxins. And he also measures a bunch of blood tests that look to see, do you have inflammation of a nature you might see with mold toxins? The problem is Shoemaker doesn't believe in Lyme. Number one, he doesn't believe in chronic Lyme. And I believe that a lot of the inflammatory markers that a lot of these mold doctors are looking at are actually elevated because of Lyme and not necessarily from mold, okay? Also, having the genetic predisposition for a problem does not mean you have the problem. It just means you have the genetic makeup that you might. So my preference these days, rather than following a Shoemaker type approach, because I think his approach can get confused with the changes you see in Lyme, is actually to do a test from a lab called Realtime's lab. And Realtime has a way of actually looking at your urine to see if you're peeing out too many toxins. And that test is what my preferred way is. I don't do the DNA predisposition test anymore. I don't do the test that looks to see, do you have inflammation markers that you might have in mold toxicity, issues, because those are the same ones you're probably going to see with Lyme. I would rather check a real-time labs test to see. The real-time is a lab that's out of Texas, actually. Okay. You can read more about that in my mold toxicity article if you want more information about that lab and why I have that kind of approach. All right. Good luck to you, B. All right. Hello, Pam. Let's see. Can you have a diagnosis of anaplasmosis without any other infections or even Lyme? I just got out of the hospital and don't think I had the right test to detect other co-infections in Lyme. So the answer is yeah. I mean, you could get anaplasmosis and not have gotten Lyme. It's possible. Um, it's possible. I'll just answer that way. So the other thing to look at is, do you have another number of symptoms that suggest Lyme? And if you do, then maybe you need to reconsider that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Pam. Hold on here just a minute, everyone. I got to take a look at something here. Okay, let's see. Hi, Christine. Let's see. What would be different approaches used for mold treatment versus systemic yeast or fungal infection? Are there different kinds of yeast infections? On the real-time lab form, there are several different kinds of yeast listed for their yeast testing. All right. So, Christine, I usually don't use their yeast testing. In fact, I don't test for them, so I'm not sure what other yeast they're looking at. What you want to do in the real-time lab there's a test called a mycotoxin panel. And their mycotoxin panel looks to see if you have 4 kinds of mycotoxins or mold toxins, okay? Those are ochratoxin, aflatoxin, something called trichosethine, which is black mold toxin, and gliotoxin. Now, gliotoxin comes from mold in wet buildings, but also can come from yeast living in you, okay? But that's the test I would do from a real-time lab, okay? Let me see if I can make sense. I have to read back through the other part of your question here. What would be different approaches used for mold treatment versus systemic yeast or fungal infection? Okay. So when it comes to mold, there's 2 problems that can develop, okay? So number one, if you happen to be a person that has the genetic profile and you get exposed to mold, you could be one of the 25% that Richie Shoemaker describes that can't get mold out, okay? Or, I'm sorry, mold toxins out, not mold, the toxins, the chemicals made by mold, okay? So if you go into a wet building and you breathe in mold toxins and you're one of the 25% that Dr. Shoemaker believes or has shown that have a genetic profile where they can't remove mold toxins, those mold toxins will get trapped in you. Not mold toxins. Chemicals made by mold will get trapped in you, okay? All right. Now, the other thing that can happen, though, and Shoemaker does not believe in this next part, but there's been some further research done by a physician out of University of Kansas named Joe Brewer. And Brewer's work shows that some people, when they've been in buildings that have a lot of mold, will get colonized. Their nose, the mucus lining and their intestine lining may have mold living in them. And the mold living in there then can become a brew pub for making mold toxins, okay? Trouble is, there's not a good culture or way to know if you have become a brew pub for your own toxins. So the approach that I use, and many of us will use, is that we will use binders first to pull toxins out, like cholestyramine or bentonite clay or activated charcoal, okay? And we make our decisions about which binders to use based on what are the actual kinds of toxins you're peeing out, okay? And then if we wind up using those binders for a bit, and that's Thor back there, everyone. That's one of my Vicenges. I have 2 of them here. That's Thor. He's starting to let me know it's probably about that time. But anyhow, if you use binders for about 2 months or 3 months, and your mold toxins are not getting better, so you go back and you repeat your tests on real time, and you find that they're not getting better and your symptoms aren't getting better, then you got to start wondering, are you colonized? And at that time, then what you do in addition to using binders is you start using drugs that treat and kill mold. And they happen to be the same ones that we might use to treat yeast, okay? I like using itraconazole, which is in the same family as diflucan. In that situation, I like using it as 2 100 milligram pills 1 time a day. I also will use a nose spray of it, either itraconazole or something called amphotericin nose spray to help get at the sinus passages too. And if you start having to treat colonization of mold by killing the mold toxins, that sometimes can be a good 3-6 month, maybe even longer process, okay? All right. But there's no test that proves it. You have to kind of decide you're colonized based on clinical suspicion. If somebody that has been peeing out mold toxins, even on binders, doesn't get better, either on their real-time lab or physically feel better, then we might start thinking a few months in to start using something that actually kills the mold or the mold that's growing in you, producing the mold toxins. Okay? All right. I know that's all kind of complicated, but take a look at my mold toxin article. Let me show you where you can find that too. So hold on here just a minute. All right, let me just do a quick screen share here. Okay, so for this one, take a look at the article I have on detoxification, or the section on detoxification. And take a look at this article on mold and Lyme toxin illness, okay? And it will talk about binders. It talks about how do you kill these things if you happen to have them living in you too, okay? All right. All right. Thank you for the question. Good luck. Hello, Debbie Lucia, Dr. Ross. Greatly appreciate all the valuable information you give us on the webinar. You're welcome. I have followed your protocol to repair the mitochondria. Let's see if I can find the second part to your question there, Debbie. Let's see. Sorry I sent this before I was finished. I had Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, 8 months of Mepron, countless doses of Doxy, all kinds of alternatives for the last 7 years. Found you about 2 years ago. I believe NT factor has been a significant in my healing. So again, NT factor, everyone, is what I use to fix the mitochondria. Okay, and it can even fix the nerves. I was talking about that earlier. I started your treatment 2.5 months ago. I have never felt better in 8 years of dealing with Lyme. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you're getting some benefit out of that. 2 symptoms linger. One is minor neuropathy in my feet, even though I'm doing your protocol. And the scariest part is I have had 3 MRIs. I have lesions in my brain. Long-term memory has come back drastically through the years. The short-term memories and finding the words are troublesome and quite scary. I do take mushrooms for memory and nerve and have been taking them for like 4 years. Need help. Okay, so in terms of fixing your mitochondria energy factories and fixing nerves, I would keep doing the nerve repair formula I have, which is that NT factor, probably be on the glutathione, and probably be on the coenzyme Q10 too, that I mentioned. Okay, and I mentioned that earlier. Okay, now the brain lesions though could be from active Lyme, and I think, although you've been treated for quite a while though too. One thing, Debbie, I may not be able to give you a full answer here. The question I have is, has anyone done MRIs that were even, say, a year or 2 years ago to see if you've had any worsening of those lesions? In other words, did being on antibiotics stop the disease from progressing, or has this happened while on antibiotics? If you've had worsening brain lesions while on oral antibiotics, it's a situation that makes me wonder about doing IV antibiotics. Okay, so that's one comment that I would give you. Okay. Um, Second thing that you might want to take a look at, and this is based on research in multiple sclerosis, which also has brain lesions, and using low-dose naltrexone. Naltrexone, which I mentioned earlier tonight, is something we can use as low-dose naltrexone. Actually does have research showing benefit in multiple sclerosis. There are reports in the literature about people having brain lesions improve when they're on low-dose naltrexone, okay? So in addition to following the nerve repair formula, mitochondrial repair formula I've mentioned, and you saying you're having good results here, you might want to take it doing low-dose naltrexone, and you might want to consider a course of IV antibiotics if these lesions are actually worsening over the years, okay? All right, these are just a couple thoughts for you. Good luck to you, all right? Thank you, and thank you for your question too. Let's see. Hello, Marita. Let's see. Do you treat solely with supplement you sell? So in my treatments, when I am working with supplements, it is the brands that I sell. These are the ones I actually use with my patients and have used with my patients over time. Okay, that includes the cat's claw tinctures I have. That includes the artemisinin that I have. It includes any of the curcumin, any of that stuff. This is what I use with my existing patients. Okay, all right. And in addition, I work with prescriptions sometimes too, and you can see a lot of those prescription approaches laid out in my TreatLine site as well too. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question, Maria. Hello, Christine. Let's see. I recently contracted Lyme disease, got the rash 2 weeks later, was on doxycycline for 21 days, but following the completion of the meds, I'm still feeling quite fatigued with cold-like symptoms. Does this mean I still have Lyme disease? It could. So if we look at statistics about the success of the 3 to 4 weeks of doxycycline, your greatest chance of wiping out Lyme, getting it out, knocked out for good, is if you start on antibiotics in the first 3 to 4 weeks of getting the infection, and then being on them for 3 to 4 weeks, okay? But even in that situation, with the research, and this is even research supported by the Infectious Disease Society of America, okay? Remember, they don't believe in chronic Lyme. Their research tells us that 10 to 15% of people are still going to go on and have symptoms, all right? And that means that probably that 3-week course of antibiotics did not work. What I would do is I would treat longer. And you might consider using a different antibiotic than doxycycline this time. It might be that the doxy did not work. And I would consider treating for all 3 forms of the germ. Okay, so it's not clear that the different ways that Lyme lives in you. So there's something called spirochete, looks like a corkscrew. There's a microscopic cyst form of the germ. Lyme also lives inside of cells and outside of cells. Okay, so we need to cover for all those possibilities. You might consider using something called clarithromycin, also known as Biaxin, 500 milligrams twice a day. And I would combine it with an herb called grapefruit seed extract, which will treat the microscopic cyst form of the germ, okay? So what Biaxin will do, Biaxin is good at treating spirochete and also getting Lyme inside of cells because it works on the inside. Probably not the best cyst killer. Grapefruit seed extract is going to do a better job at treating the cyst. And that's 250 milligrams twice a day. Excuse me, I would consider treating until you're symptom free. That doesn't mean you're going to find a doctor to do that, but that's how I would go about doing it. All right? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Lori. Let's see. I was diagnosed with Babesia 2 weeks ago and have started herbal treatment for the next few months to boost my immune system, and then gradually starting on anti-malarial drugs. I've been suffering for years with systemic symptoms. Is this treatment the normal path forward? Is it possible to have a drug-resistant strain of Babesia? So, Lori, I don't know why I would get started on your Babesia germ killer at the same time you're doing things to boost your immune system. I would just do it all at once. If you're looking at herbal options, my preference is either artemisinin or to use cryptolepis. Sometimes I use something called Cryptolepis, Sitta acuta, and Alcornia. That's a complex called CSA. You can read about how I would use either the artemisinin or use crypto or use CSA in my article that I've written. I just republished, I think it was yesterday, republished on how to treat Babesia. I updated it. That's called Kills Babesia Brief Guide. You can find that at TreatLine. I have in there the dosing schedule that I would use on those herbs. Yes, it's possible that those herbs may not work. There are prescription options that work too. And in that article, I lay out the chances that prescriptions or herbal options will work for you. I also point out in that article you need to do things to boost your immune system, and I describe how to do that as well too. Okay, let me just do a quick screen share here. All right, so take a look at in my infection treatment plans again. And the article is called Kills Babesia Brief Guide. Again, I updated this and just republished it yesterday. It'll give you herbs, prescriptions, etc. on how to go about doing this. And I describe the chances that these will work for you as well too. Okay. All right, everyone, that's it for me for tonight. I've got two Basenjis that are getting restless. In fact, you've seen Mr. Thor back there already hopping around, and he knows liable to come out here and start getting at me too here soon if I don't take them out. So I've got some Basenjis to walk. Got to go home and edit the video from this webinar tonight too. So tomorrow morning, look in your email probably around, I bet 6:30, actually 6:37. You should get an email from me saying everything is ready to go. All right. In that email, you'll also have a chance to sign up for next week's webinar. I hope you'll do that. And in a second here, I'm going to take you, I should be able to redirect you over to TreatLine. There's great resources there, and I appreciate if you would subscribe to see them. I pointed out a number of articles tonight. Keep in mind when you subscribe, that helps me to be able to keep writing these articles and to give you help and to participate with you here in these webinars as well too. Okay, so I'm going to redirect you over to the How to Subscribe page so you can read all that content. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Good night, everyone.